Where would you go?
Back to Yugoslavia to join Tito's Partisans. You will come back. Tell me that you will come back.
Damn right.
The Empire never ended.
Hey.
Oh,
Hey, I'm Fritz. We have Boris and Ray in the compound for film night. I guess we're
we've been doing a lot
movie
of them
review
recently,
show
huh? I mean, it's kind of hard not to, especially when you're dealing with this time period, because there are a lot of big and or interesting films that correspond to this last arc.
Yeah.
Yeah, we already had an episode about Yugoslav partisan films. So now we decided, like, because we are a Balkan Amerikanski podcast, why not do an episode about American films that portray Yugoslavia during the Second World War and Chetniks and Partisans. So yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of in some ways, it's a forgotten part of American film history as well. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, it's interesting when you think about movies like Force 10 or any of the movies except for Chetniks that we're going to talk about tonight, that it's one of the rare examples of American films made in the Cold War in which the communists are the good guys.
Yeah.
And so like you see these Americans helping out dudes with red stars on their caps and the people that they had helped in the Cold War, the nationalists are the bad guys.
But it's somehow, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the three films that feature partisans that we watched, I think it's never really explicitly stated they're communists, right?
It's definitely downplayed. They're definitely called.
It's downplayed, but the symbolism is there.
Yeah, the red stars are present.
Yeah, which especially in
everybody says comrade to each other.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. But there is like, I think the word communist is never like said.
No, not at all. Yeah. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, well, we're going to start with the only one that doesn't have partisans in it. In fact, if you watched this film and only this film, you wouldn't know the partisans even existed in the Second World War in Yugoslavia. And that film is called Chetniks with an exclamation point. The subtitle being, oh crap, what is it? The Guerrillas of something?
The Fighting Guerillas.
The Fighting Guerillas.
The Fighting Guerillas. Yeah.
Chetniks, the Fighting Guerillas. Yeah.
I gotta say, it's got a pretty great what's it called? Film poster.
Yeah.
Right? The imagery behind it's pretty badass. I mean, it looks like a Western kind of.
So yeah, this is the earliest made film that we discussed today. It's made in the 1943. So we have a film from the 40s, a film from the 60s, one from the 70s, and one from the 80s. And so this obviously is very interesting because this film was filmed during the Second World War, and it's also it is connected to some historical stuff that we discussed. The fact that until 1944, Western allies preferred the Chetniks over partisans, and this film kind of reflects that. And in that sense, it's very interesting. It's also kind of the most obvious propagandist film that we watched, including the Yugoslav films. Like by far, this is like the worst, let's say, in that sense.
The most obvious.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a wartime propaganda film. Mm-hmm. I mean, the closest. I mean, we in the last film episode we did about the partisan films. We started with Slavica, right, which was made immediately after the war. It's a lot less overtly propagandistic than this one.
It's more story driven, at least. Yeah, this is definitely message driven.
Yes, this is very much message driven, and it was made specifically because it was kind of a clear good guy, bad guy narrative and like a good underdog story, which Americans love a lot, and which Hollywood was looking for. I mean, in their propaganda films, they were looking for, a good David Goliath story, a good underdog that, would entice audiences and help them support the European war effort, which was not necessarily super popular.
Yeah, it was also, exactly. It was like a later blow against isolationism in the States, I think.
But in terms of like historical accuracy, it's like a complete fairy tale.
Oh, yes.
And I found it extremely funny that I saw because the film is available on YouTube, and I saw comments by Serbian nationalists and like pro-Chetnik people who are like, oh, finally, like a film that portrays real Chetniks and not, communist propaganda. And the film has almost nothing realistic about it.
Yeah, it is, in terms of historical accuracy, even less accurate than like some of the like insane blowout movies that we're going to talk about later, like where it's just, people doing, action movie hero shit that is just not possible. This is just complete fiction because none of this is even close to what happened.
No.
So in short, it's presented as a kind of a biopic and romance about Draža Mihailović, and his we'll say his supposed guerrilla struggle against the Nazis. At some point in the film, they take his family and threaten to kill the entire town of Kotor, which we'll talk about in a minute. And of course, he comes out victorious through a bunch of hijinks and whatnot, and also honorable speeches, ending, of course, in a scene where he's like flanked by two priests talking about how the fight against the Nazis is like a holy war and blah, blah, blah. So that's like the summary of it, more or less.
So the film was produced in the end of 1942, and it came out in the very beginning of 1943. I think January 11th was when it premiered.
It was called like one of the best films yet this year by a critic.
yeah, 11 days into the year. And imagine there wasn't that much competition at the time. So it was directed by Lewis King and produced by Saul Wurtzel and Brian Foy. These people were mostly known at the time for their work in the Western genre, which is pretty obvious from this film. Now it opens in a pretty typical way, right? You immediately
you talking about the Nazis meeting? Yeah.
You immediately see that, okay, like they're like, well, Yugoslavia has been defeated, but there's a stubborn man.
Well, I wrote down what they said.
Yugoslavia is ours. Our race of superiority has been established. The Yugoslavian desperados has been crushed.
Oh, yeah, they call them desperados, which is, again, a clear reference to the Western genre from which these guys are coming from.
Yes.
But yeah, they're immediately then establishing this kind of these outlaws, Chetniks, and they're like,
I mean, the guy who's saying this line about desperados is immediately killed by Chetniks.
Yes.
So then, we find out who these Chetniks are, right? And we cut to Draža Mihailović. Yeah. But we don't know it's Draža yet. It's
because it doesn't look anything like him. Like, does not resemble him in any way.
Yeah. Well, maybe it resembled him pre-war.
Yeah.
Because he definitely doesn't have a beard. He's clean shaven.
He looks like Draža pre-war, like a clean shaven like officer. Yeah.
I don't know, man. The cut of this guy's jib.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Draža like 20 years before World War II. a strapping young lad.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're looking out over what is it? They see some sort of
a convoy
movement, a convoy, and it says, "Oh, the Germans are coming." He goes, "They're not Germans, they're Italians."
Yeah, he keeps nagging his fucking subordinates. He's like, "Look through this. What do you see?" The guy's like, 7 trucks. He's like, "There's actually 8 trucks." Like, just little criticisms.
Well, it's because he's shrewd and he's one step ahead of everyone.
Yes.
Like, he maybe even knew that there were going to be 8, and he was testing his men because, like, as we see throughout this film, he really is playing like 12D chess and like is really ahead of the game.
Yes.
When it comes to like
that scene
with
is
people.
meant to establish that he's a competent officer,
Right?
Because he knows the difference between 7 and 8 and
an Italian
Italians
flag and a
Germans,
German
yeah.
flag. Yes, that's why he's in charge.
Which, to be honest, I mean, like, so they later show us, they later tell us that this is in Montenegro, close to the coast, which would have been, yes, of course, the Italian zone of occupation. Any Chetnik there would have known that these are Italians and not Germans.
Yeah.
I mean, they're mostly concerned with Muslims, so
Like,
let's be honest.
Every civilian would have been able to tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, historical Chetniks also knew this because they worked closely with Italians,
Right.
and
Yes.
got most of their equipment from them.
Yes.
Yeah, they would recognize the equipment for sure. Hey, is that us?
But that's not how it plays out in this film.
No, so they attack this convoy, and they take a bunch of Italian officers hostage. Now, again, we see that Draža's very smart, competent, and merciful, right? Because his men are like, yeah, let's kill them. And he's like, no, they're valuable. Like, what good would Italian blood do us? We should exchange them. So they're kind of in some ways setting him up for, at least when I was watching this, I was like, okay, so maybe they're setting him up for collaboration. I mean, he's willing to talk, right? And you see this throughout the film, but that turns out to be a good thing, right? That makes him smart.
Well, it makes him civilized. It makes him like somebody that the West or whatever can get behind.
So he's like, he tells these Italians, "Hey, ring up, ring up old Fritz there." And
No relation.
No relation. I'm getting ahead of myself because they do call German Fritzes, Germans Fritzes. In
So
the
many
movies.
Fritzes.
I
I really think you guys just make me watch this as punishment. You're
Yes.
mad at me for something, and you just keep making me watch Fritzes get like their throats slit and shit and like beaten up.
I will say though the shootout scene in which they the scene in which they capture the Italians is pretty dramatic. They did a pretty good job there.
Yeah.
And this is the first time you also see you also hear the music. So again, I think this is pretty well thought out because the theme on the Chetnik side, at least, is actually literally a Chetnik song. One that we talked about, I think, in our music episode, which is like typically called Get Ready Chetniks.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da,
Yeah.
na, na, na. And this is the theme throughout the song. So every time the Chetniks are doing something, some version of this score comes up. And this again has something to do with the production of the film because from what I read, there was involvement of the Yugoslav government in exile in the production of this film. And I think they definitely brought in people from the Serbian American diaspora, which they were heavily recruiting to go fight for the Chetniks on the American side, and the OSS and the like, and just sending aid to Draža. So you see this kind of from the beginning, both that they have this music, this is well thought out, the score was planned, it's very accurate, and also, did you notice that the Chetnik that captures the Italians is actually speaking Serbo-Croatian?
Mm-hmm.
Like he says, like, get out, Italians, or whatever. I mean, this is something they couldn't even get right in 90s movies about the Balkans.
Yeah.
Like, they'd have, like, some fucking dude speaking Slovak or whatever, or, like, some other Slavic language. I mean, this was actually somebody speaking Serbo-Croatian. So, kind of an interesting...
And the other films that we watched for today's episode, also people spoke. Even if they were not Serbo-Croatian speakers, they actually spoke Serbo-Croatian, yeah.
Well, two of the other films were filmed in Yugoslavia.
Yeah, but we're talking about Jaws here, we'll get to him, but
yeah.
So I like in this scene with the negotiation, it's actually a kind of a cute scene. Like it's not bad, it's funny. They're negotiating for gasoline with these Italian prisoners, and one of the Italian commanders gets upset that he's not worth more.
I refuse to be ransomed for less than 50.
The Major thinks he's worth 50 tins. All right, General, calm yourself. I'll let him go for 20.
It's like a funny scene. It's good.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely like 40s comedy.
Yeah. But I think right after that, they introduce the 50-1 rule. The The Nazis then have a meeting talking about how they're going to kill 50 civilians for every one German soldier that falls. And it's, I don't know, it's a really, it's weird because you're already like in fantasy land, and it's weird when they insert something real into the movie because there's not a lot of it. I mean, most of this is like a crazy fantasy.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's pure fiction if you know anything that was going on in Montenegro at that time.
Yeah, I mean, what's the name of the film, the old one, like Cat People? Is that the film?
Cats. The music,
like the Broadway musical, or
no? I think there is like there's a one that also put like an old American film that portrays like Serbs.
It's called Cat People.
Yeah, I think so. I just wanted to point out how this is equally as accurate in the portrayal of Balkan people as that film, which is I think it's
Cat People. Yeah, I see it. She was marked with the curse of those who sunk in court and kill by night. An American man marries a Serbian immigrant who fears that she will turn into the cat person of her homeland's fables if they are intimate together.
Okay.
Why didn't we watch this?
This is a 42 film, and I think there is a remake from the 80s or something. Yeah,
this looks awesome.
Yeah, I mean they also kind of have For example, the Serbian-born fashion illustrator is called Irena Dubrovna, and so on. Yeah, okay.
It's only an hour long. We can watch it while we're recording this.
Yeah.
You know, ironically enough, the names are more accurate in this, even if they're mispronounced, than in any of the other movies. Because like all the characters at least do have like Serbian names. They're just mispronounced. Mm-hmm. Like in the later films, they just like make up what American people think are like Slavic names or South Slavic names, like Ukrainian names. Or was somebody's named like Dubček or something? Like, like fucking Czech or something. but in this one, at least, so like they introduced then Draža's family, who's undercover and living in Kotor. So his wife Ljubica,
his wife actually was called Jelica. I don't know why they changed that.
To make it fit Dragoljub. It's cuter.
Yeah.
But they only call him Draža throughout the film. Maybe they didn't actually know what his wife's real name was, or like the contact that they had in the Yugoslav royal embassy in DC was like, I think it's Ljubica.
Ljubica something, I don't know.
And turned out it's Jelica, because I mean he wasn't even that important of an officer before the war. I mean it's highly likely some diplomat wouldn't have known, right? I mean,
it's funny though, you know,
wife's name was.
You also get the sense that the writers did a lot of research for this movie and then just decided to ignore it, you know?
Well, no, they did some research. So like some things, like I said, are accurate with the music and like, you know, later, like with the actors actually.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They know what they're doing. They just at many times decide just to do something else, you know?
Well, because it's a propaganda film.
Yeah, it's a propaganda film.
Like a very, very clear agenda.
Yeah. I mean, this film has a very typical narrative about like a band of like noble rebels, and you can fit that. I mean, if the historical material concerned any continent, they would make basically the same film. They would just change a few references, and that's it.
Yeah, I heard it called a programmer by critics of the time, which I thought was a cool word. It just follows the program.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, they, you know, the costumes are relatively accurate as well too, because they have the guys in like Montenegrin national and like Montenegrin folk costume that we see later. So they introduce Draža then as a family man, and of course, like this is a classic Hollywood Western style film. There has to be a little bit of romance, right? So he somehow goes from the mountains to go see his wife and kids undercover, and I do think it's kind of funny that his kids pronounce their last name as Radic.
Yeah.
That's like their undercover name,
yeah. Their undercover name is Radic, which is, of course, would be Radic.
And they're like small children.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in reality, Draža at the time had like 3 grown children. 2 of them were in Partisans.
Yeah, his kids are young and cute, and his son's like a troublemaker. Yeah, and he doesn't like those Germans, you know.
No. My favorite line from that moment, though.
In fact, he wants to like be a school shooter because he's
he does. He threatens to shoot his teacher, which I get when you meet the teacher. Like he's right, you know. But like, I There's this cute scene where, okay, he comes on this donkey in the cover of night or whatever, and the kid has the idea, like, I'll hide your donkey in the shed, Papa. To which Draža responds like, you're a real Chetnik. It's like, that's what it means. A Chetnik is somebody that knows to put the donkey in the shed.
Yeah.
Good start.
But, he's having this like romantic moment with his wife too. And is this where they have the dialogue about the Germans, right? And then he's like, oh yeah, the Germans are strong, but we are stronger.
Yeah.
Like, our people don't like to be conquered, which is like, okay, great. I mean, I understand, but like, there aren't very many people who like to be conquered.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's particularly unique, but okay. I mean, it's inspirational, and there's the appropriate kind of score behind their like, embrace.
Yeah. And Draža has a kind of Alec Guinness kind of voice, I would say.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Totally. Although it sometimes alternates into like he does do like a weird accent.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's inconsistent. Like he does sometimes do a Slavic accent a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But this is kind of true throughout the film. Like the Germans also.
Yeah, they're kind of in and out, aren't they?
Like, some of them have like kind of half the time a German accent. The other time just sound like regular 1940s American Hollywood guys.
Yeah. It's refreshing that as we go on in this series of movies we watched, that people begin to speak their actual languages in the films, which is nice. But here, I mean, yeah.
Well, I think it's pretty impressive what they were able to do, given that it was fucking produced in 1942 in Hollywood. I mean, it's pretty impressive in that sense from like a film standpoint.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So they established, as we mentioned, the setting to be basically the Montenegrin coast and the mountains surrounding it, which historically makes almost no sense for this time period. If you've listened to our series on Chetniks and, well, Montenegro also as well, you'll know that this doesn't particularly make sense. Draža was in Montenegro, especially in like 1943, but definitely not on the coast.
No, he was in the north of Montenegro, mostly busy slaughtering the Muslim population there, civilians, and quite far away from Kotor.
And so Kotor as a setting's relatively interesting because, as we mentioned, this was the site of some of the earliest and most clear collaboration between the Chetniks and the occupiers. So, I mean, I pulled up this thing from Jozo Tomaszewicz's book that in 1942, and by the end of 1943, 20,000 Chetniks were organized as the Italian auxiliary forces in the independent state of Croatia and in the anti-communist volunteer militia, which included several thousand Chetniks specifically from the area of Kotor.
Yeah,
so
that's not clear in this film.
It is absolutely not clear in this film. It's also clear in this film that the Germans are running the whole show, which is also kind of jumping the gun a little bit historically as well. And he tries to this is where they also try to show that Draža's smart and understands the game because he's trying to play off the German-Italian tension and is successful at it because the Germans are we can't openly be against the Italians.
Yeah.
But Draža knows this and he's really playing all the angles. And so we see that Kotor is very loyal to Draža and they are very much against the Germans and the Italians. The civilians, everybody is against them, which was true, but the Chetniks were very much on the side of the Italians.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of people in Kotor were against the occupier. They just weren't with the Chetniks. Right. That much is clear. And so the Germans decide that they're going to act against the Chetniks, right? And their way of doing this is by basically punishing the civilian population because they know that Draža's family is hiding out in the city somewhere, but they don't know who they are, right?
Yeah,
because
they even come and visit, and Draža's wife very poorly covers up their tracks. They're cooking deer stew that Draža just brought them, and somehow the Germans don't remember this visit. I don't understand how hard it is for them to
yeah, that scene is interesting, right? Because Draža comes down from the mountains and he brings his family venison, which is pretty luxurious. Even the the story you typically hear of like guerrilla warfare in Yugoslavia during the Second World War is that they literally had nothing to eat and that they were eating like bark off of trees and shit like that.
No, but he's like, oh, there's always more deer to hunt in the forest. Don't worry about it, honey.
There's plenty of deer to hunt in the forest.
Yes.
He's like bringing his family like fucking venison.
Yeah. But in the end, the Germans only, I guess, figure this out because of this teacher that his son wanted to shoot, rightly, who at some point claims, I wrote this down. She says when she's turning in the family, she figures it out through the son that this is really Draža's family. And she says,
I'm a trained child psychologist. So if a child attempts to deceive me, I know it immediately.
Which is like the worst like look for child psychology I think I've seen in the film ever. Yeah. So this is how they get found out.
Yeah, but again, like Draža keeps trying to make deals, but like the occupiers are reluctant, which is completely opposite of the truth. I mean, Draža was trying to make deals, and they were happy to make deals with him so that they could fight the Partisans together.
Yeah.
And it comes to like that interesting moment with the hostage taking. Did you guys catch the name of the field marshal that he bluffs on?
No, I missed it.
He comes into town, like with the white flag. Draža wants to make a deal with the Germans, and the Germans are trying to starve Kotor, and so he decides he's going to put an end to it. And he says that he'll come to negotiate and bring his under like the white flag and come unarmed and come into the center of Kotor to negotiate with the Germans. And so he comes into the center of Kotor to negotiate with the Germans. The Germans have already you've already seen in previous shots that the Germans are like, yes, we're going to capture him and murder him immediately. We're preparing a firing squad. Uh-huh. We don't negotiate with terrorists. They do actually emphasize this legal aspect a lot in this film, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, they return to it a lot.
Because the Germans keep on saying, Yugoslavia surrendered. This is not a legal army. We are not obliged to the Geneva Convention or whatever, any international law. Because this is not a legal fighting force.
Right.
Very interesting, like, point to make consistently throughout this movie.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of films where Germans are concerned with the legality of their actions in the field.
So anyway, Draža goes to negotiate with these Krauts, and, it comes down to him basically being like, no, we'll never surrender. We want every last occupier gone from our land, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to kill you now. And then he bluffs and says that he captured a field marshal. And the field marshal who happens to be named von Clausewitz. Now, if you know anything about military history, right? It's a 19th century Prussian general who was incredibly important, right, for military theory, the theory of total war.
War nerds really like him, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Clausewitz, Doctrine, all this kind of shit is super, important to military history. But they didn't actually capture this fictitious field marshal von Clausewitz. But it was enough to trick the Germans into letting him go back into the mountains so that they can continue to negotiate. So that's a little weird symbolic drop they threw in there for... Not quite sure what reason. I think, it's a recognizable name to most Americans probably at the time.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't.
But what's interesting is that they bring this up.
Maybe the authors were just signaling to other nerds, like we are nerds or something like this. I don't know.
Could be. Easter egg.
Yeah.
Oh, they know Clausewitz, man. That's rad.
Well, it's like,
did you hear them play that Chetniks song at the beginning? How do they even know about that shit? Yeah, it's fan service. Do you think there's like a deeper symbolic meaning? Like if the
absolutely, because
if you capture total war,
the Germans were like waging total war or whatever. I mean, like for some reason in this universe, cinematic universe, the Germans don't know who Clausewitz is. And there's a field marshal who is named that, who is not the guy who died a century earlier. Right.
Yeah. They never thought of themselves, he's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And what's interesting about that is that, like, it turns out that Draža bluffed about this, but like it kind of never comes up again in the film.
Sorry, this is great. Like maybe they should have tried this, in zones of U.S. occupation as well. Like, you know what? We've got General fucking Patton here.
Yeah.
I swear to God, we'll kill him.
The Taliban's like, we got Patton here.
Oh no, guys, they got Patton. I've heard about that guy. Oh.
We've captured General Sherman. And we're torturing him back in our lair. Like, what's the fuck?
It's a great idea. I love it.
So as the Germans get caught with their pants down because they let Draža go, and his other commanders that are dressed in appropriate Montenegrin national costume, and so they get fucking pissed off about this, and they arrest his son.
Yeah, a cool scene too. Like
little Mirko gets arrested.
Mirko's in bed and he says like, "Mama, are you there?" And the door opens to reveal like the towering shadow of a Gestapo officer. It's cool. It's also very Western, cool. Very black hat entering the room.
Yeah. I noticed that again. Americans like a specific set of names for their South Slavic characters, in that there is also a Chetnik named Petrovich here. We'll see Petrovich come up later on in Force 10. And there's a Mirko, right? His son, instead of Marco, that we'll see later on.
There's your Marco. Huh? It's Mirko.
Yeah, it's Marco's Mirko in this film.
Okay. That's a joke you'll get later, audience.
Yeah. For some reason, Draža keeps talking to the Germans throughout this film. It gets kind of boring, to be honest. Like there's some good shooting and killing later on, but like the bulk of the movie is Draža like talking to the Germans and then being like, I will never surrender. And then they're you will not have our mercy now, Draža. And then like them doing something.
But those are also the biggest laughs of the film, if you know the history.
Yes. Because then it comes to probably my favorite scene in the film, before like all the action scenes and stuff like this, is Draža comes back to his wife. The people are starving in Kotor, and his son has been arrested, although he doesn't know this yet.
Yeah.
And he's like talking to his wife, and he goes on this monologue about, because she's like, "Oh, Draža, maybe you should surrender. Like, maybe it would be better if we just surrender so we can live normally and happily. Blah blah blah. Let us be happy." And then he goes on to mansplain to her that he needs to resist because are the collaborating countries, and then he lists like Czechoslovakia, blah blah blah. Are they any better off than the ones that fight, such as Greece and whatever?
Yes.
Who else did he say was fighting?
I don't remember. Poland and shit. But who was fighting? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Greece and Poland.
Yeah.
And blah blah blah. Then he's like, it's terrible one way or the other, and that like if we give up now,
if we believe
a generation
Hitler's
from now we'll all be
friendship.
Fucking Germans or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. Direct
like,
message to American isolationists. Like direct that.
Yeah, but it's very hilarious that he's giving this speech because they did choose to collaborate.
Yeah,
and this is the funny thing in the previous like monologues that he has to like the German officers, they basically make him into Tito, right? Because he's like this like uncompromising leader of a guerrilla force that like will never collaborate with the Germans, that keeps on fighting, that has like the support of the people, that whatever, blah blah blah. But it's Draža in 1942, which is
so America's first partisan film was called Chetniks with an exclamation point.
Yeah.
All right. You win some, you lose.
And that's probably like if there was no this inconvenient thing of a partisan movement in Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
That's probably the historical picture of like the mainstream one of Draža that we would have, at least formed by the Western Allies.
It's the one that a lot of people sadly have to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then the movie kind of climaxes towards the end with this big battle scene, which again, the Chetniks pull some deception. They kind of get the Germans to go one way, and they deceive them.
They pull a look over there.
Literally by lighting a bunch of torches.
Yeah. They do the hey over here and then punch them. Yeah, it's the classic move. Yeah.
Although again, this is a more accurate in terms of at least like language and the like sequence, and it's pretty well done too. So they have these Chetniks marching through the forest with these torches, and they're all singing this actual Chetnik song in Serbo-Croatian. My guess is that they probably got one of the many Serbian American like choirs or bands that were around at the time, many of whom opened, like, this was like a big spectacle when this film opened, especially in like Serbian American communities in Chicago and Cleveland and throughout Western Pennsylvania, Indiana, blah, 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 where like, you know, these bands, Tambritsan bands would come and like play the opening of this film, and like these Serbian choirs would come and sing and the like. I'm guessing that they probably actually, again, got one of these groups to do that, because they are singing accurately a Chetnik song, and it's it's the climax of the film. It's pretty well done, I'd say, for the time. Completely historically inaccurate, but that doesn't really matter. So to cut a long story short, it's not even actually a very good battle scene. Honestly, the battle scene earlier where they capture the Italians is much better than this one.
Yeah.
Like that was like a kind of cool gunfight. This is just whatever.
I think I was kind of nodding off at this point, to tell you the truth.
It's not a very captivating film, to be honest. But the Chetniks then succeed in liberating Kotor, which we know the literal opposite is true. They were in Kotor, but with the Italians in a collaborationist force.
They liberated from the people that lived there.
Yeah, so you know, this film ends then with Draža in front of a church.
As long as there is a Yugoslav able to carry arms, this holy war will continue. Neither German might nor German frightfulness can deter us from the goal we have set. Complete freedom for our people.
Which looks oddly like a Catholic church.
Yeah, the priests have a bit of a Catholic vibe too. I think they're just
the priests definitely have the Orthodox thing going on.
They're wearing collars.
Orthodox priests in the U.S. do wear collars.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, they also have they have beards and shit. I mean, they're very clearly Orthodox priests, and like they wearing big crosses with beards. And then
so Orthodox priests have beards. Chetniks don't have beards. So it's some beard stuff was correct.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I think they think that like an American audience doesn't. Well, they didn't like beards at the time, I think.
Well, they don't look civilized with beards. I think that's this is all about producing a sense of Draža that is like in line with civilization, as like the American and UK.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a smart officer. He's forced into these conditions by his desire to fight for his people who want desperately to resist these horrible occupiers, which was true. Except that he was collaborating with them.
There is this interesting line, I think, in the beginning of the film, when I think you mentioned it, when his son says how he hates the Germans, and Draža says, "Yes, I understand. You're right to hate the Germans."
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of
But like even in the most generous narratives of Draža's collaboration, like this movie is inaccurate. I mean,
it's a complete fantasy. It has nothing to do. I mean,
because even the guys that are like, okay, he did collaborate a little bit because he was trying to save people. And blah blah blah.
No,
like
he
in this
specifically
movie,
overtly says it doesn't matter.
Which is why I'm saying, that they turn him into Tito because. He's like totally like, oh yeah, my son got fucking captured. Well, fuck it. Like other people's sons are going to get
massacred. I can't. It's not going to stop me. He says stuff.
Yeah, which like in this kind of revisionist Chetnik narrative, or like the kind of more generous to Draža didn't really know what was going on. He was just trying to help. It was the exact opposite, right? He wasn't willing to sacrifice his people, and in this film, he absolutely is.
Well, yeah, because that's the heroic story. I mean,
Right.
not what Draja did. I mean, in the most generous way you can interpret what Draja was, he's definitely not a hero. That's not what he was, even if you support his politics. I don't know how you could, but I mean, it's very hard to portray him as a hero. The material for that narrative doesn't really exist.
You mentioned, I think, in a previous episode, the Serbian series Ravna Gora, right? You saw some of this, I guess, and you mentioned that it was just fucking boring. Like it's him sitting. in
no
the
one
field
liked
thinking.
it.
Yeah,
it was pathetic because it was. I guess it was too accurate. And even when if someone like in a really like pro Draja people made it, they couldn't made it even interesting, because there was the story there. I mean, there's no story there. I mean, you can only I guess you can have a heroic Draja in a film like this. It is like a fantasy film, which I guess today it would be kind of ridiculous even for pro Draja people to make. So they made a TV series that was was relatively historically grounded, at least in what it's portrayed, not in what it didn't portray. But
right,
still, even the things that are true about him are not impressive at all.
No,
right. And so the film ends with him flanked by these priests and these happy people in the center of Kotor, and it goes on to talk about how X amount of territory in Yugoslavia has currently been liberated by these heroic fighters, blah, 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 blah. Credit sequence.
Yeah.
So it ends on kind of a high note that these good guys did manage to, liberate territory, but they need help, and blah, blah, blah. And so, there ends that film. I think there's not too much more to say about it. I think other than the fact that the reviews at the time were mostly positive, although they were positive in the sense that it was a good propaganda film. One New York Times film reviewer said it was totally formulaic and boring, but that it said the right thing, and so that was okay. Because I mean, this is again January 1943. The art of cinema is, I guess, less of a priority to the war effort. So I mean, most reviewers agreed that it was formulaic and kind of garbage, but that it was all in all
a great
an
film.
Okay message, right? It was a good message to have. After the Second World War, it ended up getting play in the early 60s, a little bit during the anti-communist kind of era, right?
I see that it was actually in circulation on television into the 70s even.
Yeah.
Lasted some time. Had an afterlife.
Yes, it did. So it did continue on for some time. I don't know. It was very popular with the pro-Chetnik diaspora.
Understandably.
In the United States. We'll get to them getting triggered later on when we talk about the rest of these films. Because to them, this was an accurate portrayal of what the Chetniks were up against and how the Chetniks behaved, and this was an accurate film to them. And all the later Hollywood films that involved partisans were pure communist propaganda that drove them nuts.
Although they ended up imitating anyway.
I mean, you'll still find old Serbian American people who are who think that this is a great fucking film.
Oh,
and a true representation of honorable resistance fighters, Chetniks, the guerrillas.
I was fantasizing through
the Fighting Guerillas.
Well, I was, I got a little bored in this movie, so I started imagining it as gorillas, the animal, and it's a great film in that case, and I hope somebody does that. Chetniks, the Fighting Guerillas, and does it as a horror film. It would be fantastic.
Yes, I'm not a person who dislikes. I mean, I've watched lots of classic Hollywood films. I can appreciate it. I mean, I know that they get boring and stuff. This one is not a particularly good one.
No, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, you can skip it if you're really.
I mean, no, you know what you should do? If you've listened to the episodes on the Chetniks, this is a fun way. This is a bit of a payoff, kind of. You'll see the humor.
This is a fun way of seeing a complete fantasy brought to life.
And you can impress your friends by saying, actually, every 10 minutes.
Actually, by 1943, these were integrated into the anti-communist volunteer force.
Yes.
Now.
No one will ever come to your house again for a movie night.
Yes. All right, so let's move on from fucking Chetniks and let's go into Hollywood where communists are good guys.
Although they
this
don't call
bizarre
them
alternate reality.
This bizarre alternate reality that
So we'll talk about 3 more films, and I think the idea is for us to spend most of that time talking about Force 10 from Navarone, which we'll talk towards the end of the episode. But
which I'm sure most of your dads have shown you.
Yeah. So there are 3 films that we want to cover. So the idea is to spend less time on talking about the next 2 films and to spend most of the time on Force 10, which I guess we could manage to do because there are basically 3 versions of a same film.
Totally.
Which is also kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So as Boris said, this is like this. Obviously, a switch happened in American portrayal of what happened in Yugoslavia during the Second World War, and now it's firmly established that the Partisans were the good guys. You don't portray Chetniks at all, or if you do portray them, as we'll see in Force 10, they're horrible monsters, like almost literally.
Yeah.
So the first film is kind of interesting. It's called The Secret Invasion. It's a film from 1964, and what's interesting about it is, first of all, it's a Roger Corman film, which is, I don't know, Boris can correct me as our film guy, but I guess Roger Corman is kind of a well-respected film director who was mostly known for like B films, and they're also kind of considered at least competent, if not even good. Like he definitely.
I think he was called like the pop movie king or something like this. He had a reputation for like churning out big hits that were like
and was important for many like
quality,
well-respected film authors in America, like Coppola and I don't know.
Absolutely,
and mostly known for the like horror genre films, I think. And this film is interesting because it sets the formula for all 3 films that most people would associate with the Dirty Dozen film, I would say.
Or this new generation, probably Suicide Squad. I mean, it's the same exact thing.
Yes. So you have a ragtag group of, in most cases, criminals, not necessarily, but at least an irregular group of military people who are sent on the terrain to do a special mission, which is highly dangerous, and then they make bonds with the local resistance or something like this. All 3 films are basically about this, and all 3 films send this ragtag group to Yugoslavia, wartime Yugoslavia. Strangely enough, I think all 3 films in 43. So 43 is definitely an important year for this episode.
Well, because by 44, like a lot of Yugoslavia was already liberated.
It's not exciting enough. Yeah.
43 is like when it was
high stakes.
Close.
Could have gone either way.
Yeah. So this one is a bit different because from the rest, because this ragtag group of criminals. So this film is interesting because it has this formula of the Dirty Dozen film, but 3 or 4 years before the first Dirty Dozen film.
Yes.
And it's also different from the other films that this group is organized by British intelligence and not the American. And it also in the first, so it's not a Dirty Dozen; it's 5 criminals released from prison.
Significantly, they're a very international group as well. Yeah, like most people are from somewhere else.
Yes, for example, there is an IRA guy.
Yes,
played by
he's literally a fucking leprechaun. He's an IRA leprechaun.
He's played by Mickey Rooney.
Sings as he blows up Germans.
Yes, because that's Mickey Rooney. That's I guess
I love
what he could do.
Scarlett's got a present for you. It'll be a big surprise.
And also, I kind of like that there's a guy who's basically described as a cold-blooded killer.
Yes.
And he's played by Henry Silva.
Henry Silva, that face, that face.
Yeah,
he's the original that face guy.
He's also kind of mostly known for B films, and he was in a lot of Rat Pack films. And also, I know him mostly from the Jim Jarmusch's film Ghost Dog, where he plays the mob boss. Yeah. And very recognizable guy. And so there's 5 of these guys, and the leader of the group, like one of those, is a Italian criminal mastermind who's like very educated, has like 3 university degrees, called Roberto Rocca, the character, but he's played by a guy called like a famous Italian actor called, I think, Vallone.
Yeah, Vallone. Yeah. Interesting backstory. Him. Yeah.
Yes, it's interesting because a lot of these people in these older films actually were a part of the Second World War and fought there.
Yes.
I think a couple of guys here did, and Vallone was a member of the communist resistance in Italy.
He was the lead editor of their paper, La Unità.
Yeah, and it's the group is organized by a British intelligence officer called Major Richard Mace, who's played by the Stuart Granger, who's an American actor who like really didn't even try to almost to portray a British person,
he really phoned that in.
Yeah. So, they assemble this group of hardened criminals, and they want to send them to occupy Yugoslavia. In this film, what they need to do is
they need to rescue an Italian general that has supposedly switched sides.
Yeah, I kind of confuse these films because that's
they blend
premise.
together.
Yes.
Well, because they're all very similar. Yeah.
So exactly right. So they need to rescue an Italian general who is held in some kind of fortress prison in Dubrovnik, also known as King's Landing.
Dubrovnik really saves this film. There's a lot of great stuff in it. I'm not saying there's not, but Dubrovnik's like the star of this film for sure.
Because he's the commander, this guy, the general, is the commander of all Italian occupying forces, but he is not a fascist and is suspected by the Germans to be pro-Allied, so this is why they imprison him. And the Allies, in fact, think that this is true, so they want to liberate him in order, because he's loved by Italian troops, and if they have him on their side, all Italian troops will join the Partisans. And this is why they're doing all of this, to make Italians join Yugoslav Partisans.
Yes.
And of course, the idea is that when they go to Yugoslavia...
Great. I mean, this is great that this is the main fucking driving force of this film.
Yeah.
If you know anything about the American involvement in Italy later, this is hilarious. Yeah.
Yes. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And so what all of these three... This is the basic premise, except the concrete mission changes, but the premise is the same in all 3 films. What is also the same is that the way the partisans are portrayed is very kind of heroic, very ready to self-sacrifice. There usually is a partisan called Marco, I think, at least in 2 films.
Marco is common.
Yeah. And there is a female partisan, which has is usually the most prominent female role in the film. In all 3 of them. In this
until
case,
she dies.
Yes, until she dies. In this one, the partisan fighter is called Mila.
Yeah.
And she's a very modest, heroic, kind of, ready to self-sacrifice, stoic person, I would say. Mm-hmm. They're always kind of stoic.
I mean, I feel like American or maybe Western in general audiences were kind of captivated by this, by the presence of female fighters.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it's very prominent in all these films, and it's unique to these men too. They're like, oh, I have to fight with a broad kind of thing.
It turns out though that she's,
and then they prove themselves of being the most kind of badass.
Yeah.
Well, it's also helpful that she's almost inevitably newly single, and I think there's also this kind of, I'm going to call it a kind of a creepy theme of the exotic, warrior lady that everybody's sort of trying to, I don't know.
Yes.
Tame.
Definitely there is a fetishization of women fighters from other parts of the world. Like we can see today with how a lot of leftists approach the Kurdish fighters in Rojava, for example, I would say, how they portray them. It's very similar to how these partisan women from Yugoslavia were portrayed in these films, I would say, at least aesthetically.
Totally. Yeah.
And so they they get to Yugoslavia, and so the partisan women they connect with is called Mila. There is a commander called Marko, of course, and Mila is portrayed by an actress who, in this film, she's credited as Mia Massini.
Yeah.
Her real name was Špela Rozin. She's a Yugoslav actor, a Slovenian, who she has this Italian name because she mostly acted in Italian films, specifically the so-called peplum films, also known as like sword and sandals films,
right,
which are kind of historical fantasy films, mostly set in Greco-Roman or medieval period. And so she was a kind of a well-known actor in Italy. And yeah, I mean, so it was considered a kind of a B film at the time. So the guy who portrayed the British officer, Stuart Granger, who was kind of well known, was dissatisfied for having to act in such a B film. So Roger Corman kind of rewrote his role as they went to give him more lines, which made him, I guess, satisfied. As Fritz said, like Dubrovnik is featured very prominently. That's kind of, I guess, the most obvious kind of feature of this film.
I mean, it's obviously a very picturesque place.
It's an incredible set that they probably got for nothing.
Yeah. They actually had a lot of help from the Yugoslav government.
As all these films did, actually.
Yes.
It's
interesting that even like a B film like this kind of had this help. They were promised more help than they got in the end. They had like Yugoslav army participate in it and a lot of equipment, but less than they were promised because there was an earthquake. So a lot of like army people, like soldiers, had to they were busy with the
was that the Skopje earthquake or what?
Was that in 60? So the
64, I think.
The film, it was filmed in 63. So maybe it was Skopje in 63.
It's a good question. I know it was in
maybe it was that one.
63.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
That
was a big earthquake. Like it wiped out the entire city.
Yeah. So I mean, that's mostly. There's no need to talk too much about it.
I want to talk a little bit about Mila, though, just a little bit, because as far as like the trope of the super stoic partisan warrior woman go, like Mila takes this like to an extreme. At one point, her baby dies. And she does not care. Like the actress doesn't shed a tear and just like stares blankly. And you want to say it's shock, but I don't think it is. It's just
she's very emotional, but she's super rational. I mean, she cares. I think she definitely cares.
But she doesn't does she not even notice the baby's like waving its arms around, trying not to be, It's a crazy scene. He's accidentally suffocated by the killer dude.
Silva. The psycho killer kind of guy who's actually probably not that, but they say that's what he is.
Yeah.
He's kind of paired with Mia to do some stuff, and then there are like German soldiers nearby and they had to be quiet. So he puts his hand on the baby's mouth and accidentally suffocates the baby. And that's, so I think she is kind of devastated by that, but he who's supposedly the cold-blooded killer is more devastated. Yeah. He cries a lot. And then she has this kind of rational approach. Well, I mean, obviously it's not your fault.
Well, okay, there's that. But she also, like, when she puts the dead baby down, she just sort of, like, flops it head first onto the floor. Yeah. I mean, it's just not a lot of, I'm not getting a lot from Mila here.
Yeah, it was a kind of formulaic, I guess, portrayal of a stoic fighter. Like, the point was that she cared, but she understood that it was not done on purpose. The struggle
goes on,
and we have to, defeat the fascists, and it was an accident.
But she also doesn't really seem to care when she has her obligatory death scene either. Like her death is also very. I mean, we can call it stoic, but I'd say bored.
This is true with most like Western portrayals of I'd say Slavic people in general. I mean, like in this concretely, we see it in like both like the Partisans and Chetniks. They're kind of these noble, like simple people who are like really driven by their impulses to like, for freedom and stuff, but they don't really understand things. And they're kind of, we like them, but they're not like us kind of thing. It's like, like the kind of immortal Russian in a lot of like movies, Hollywood movies, like they're like portrayed as super strong, but like not emotional at all.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they can fight forever, but like, you know, whatever. They're just, that's how they are.
Yes.
You know,
This is
strong peasant stock kind of thing.
But it's also this difficult to impress thing too. I think when it comes to the women in particular, that is like and then you have all these heroic men doing amazing feats, and this like woman whose attention that at least one or two of them is trying to get, who won't quite give it. It's like a. Yeah, I
mean, this is like a very kind of orientalistic way of approaching Balkan people. There is even there is a term for that, like what is it, Balkanistic or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's basically the same thing. You know, like the way the Mujahideen are portrayed in Rambo 3 or something like that. It's kind of basically very similar to that.
A couple other things about this movie, small. One is that if you're watching it, there's a really great scene where you actually see the director in the shot directing a battlefield for like a second, but it's awesome. It's a really good moment. He's like conducting it like a fucking orchestra, you know. It's like people are crawling on the ground. It's really cool. And also there's a shit ton of karate chopping in this, which I didn't really expect from a World War II film, but a lot of karate chops. It's like 5
big at the time.
Big karate chops in this movie. So that's the Secret Invasion, 1964 Corman film. Yeah.
So the next one that we wanted to discuss also kind of briefly. So the Secret Invasion was a kind of a proto Dirty Dozen film, and the next one is the Dirty Dozen 4.
We skipped a lot of Dirty Dozens. We're just looking for the Yugoslav
I wasn't even
stuff.
aware that this film exists before we wanted to record this. I think I knew that there is like Dirty Dozen 2.
Well, let me clarify though that if you're looking for this in English, it's called Dirty Dozen Fatal Mission. But there's also a film before it called Dirty Dozen Deadly Mission. And so I in the international versions, I was looking to see how did they differentiate these two films in different languages, you know, because it's essentially the same title. And most people just call it Dirty Dozen 4.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those are like Dirty Dozen 3 and 4. The second one has Lee Marvin.
I think that one's called The New Mission.
Yes, in the first one, the third and the fourth one don't have them. I think the only there are two actors that from the original film, which is Telly Savalas, who has basically the main role, but he doesn't play the guy who he plays in the first film, because in the first film he plays the biggest scumbag psycho of the Dirty Dozen.
Also, by the way, that's a part of the trope we didn't explain, that there's always like a traitor in the midst, always somebody that's not totally in the program. Yeah,
so Savalas in the Dirty Dozen film, as you probably know, he even plays a guy called Maggot, who is like a rapist psycho, the worst guy of the Dirty Dozen. But in the third and the fourth sequel, he plays a different character who assumes the role that Lee Marvin had in the original film. He's like Major Wright, who kind of organizes this group of criminals to send them on a mission. So the premise is the same, except this time they send this group of criminals for a very dangerous mission in occupied Yugoslavia.
Right, which is why we watched.
And of course, notably on the Orient Express.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Which is something that is recognizable to Western audiences, right? Of course, the Orient Express being the train that goes from Western Europe.
It's the one with all the murders on it.
From Mitteleuropa to Istanbul, right? Yeah.
And through Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
Through Belgrade.
Yeah.
Belgrade.
So what is interesting? Okay, this is like a group of like criminals, like in the first one. What is interesting is there is a woman now who's not a criminal. She's like a proper like officer. What is she? Lieutenant something?
Lieutenant something was her name. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's like a proper kind of officer, really. Like
Lieutenant Carol Campbell.
Yes, Carol Campbell.
Okay.
Portrayed by Heather Thomas.
Yeah.
And also the other actor that's in the original film is Ernest Borgnine.
Yeah.
Who actually is the only one who portrays the same character as in the first film. This like major general who's like, I guess, in charge of the whole operation, but doesn't do anything really. I mean, by
it's in the contract.
This is a film from '88, so it's he's very old. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in this concrete mission in the Balkans, in Yugoslavia, what this group has to do is they know that a secret Fourth Reich regime is already being set up, and all of them are transported for some reason by Orient Express towards Istanbul. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not just for some reason, right? This is also, I think, historically inaccurate. I mean, so they bring up the point that the Germans were forced to surrender in a train car to the French after World War I, and then the Germans made the French do the same thing in a train car in World War II, which is correct. Although they say that this is a train car that was on the Orient Express, which I do not think was true at all. I think they just made that up. And that this is the next train car in that sequence.
2024 or something like this,
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's why it's on the Orient Express, I guess. Although, and I do kind of like the premise of them going to Istanbul, which is neutral at the time, to then like establish a Fourth Reich that would take a long time to establish.
Yeah,
like,
it's kind of a cool premise.
Yeah, like it's kind of a
it's
cool
like a
premise.
stay behind thing with more organization.
It's a stay behind.
But the US
it
is
would
not
actually
running.
be like a smarter stay behind thing, right? Instead of like putting units behind to like fight and do sabotage, they took like the smartest minds and took them to Turkey and then had them like reproduce like a new Reich, which is kind of like, what the Croats did in Argentina.
It's what the Atlanteans did to the entirety of the world.
I mean, the historical inaccuracy here is that America is against the Fourth Reich.
Right, yeah. And did you guys get what the name?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you guys get the name of this operation of establishing this Fourth Reich? That's hilarious too.
What is it?
It's called Operation Valkyrie.
Right.
What the fuck? The operation designed to kill Hitler is the name they use in this movie to establish the Fourth Reich. Yeah.
So before they go to actually get to Yugoslavia, it's interesting the film kind of establishes some kind of racial politics as well, which we'll see in the next film for Stand from Navarone. So the guy who's kind of, I guess, they wanted to be the main character, but they, I think, kind of ditched the idea in the middle of the film. And I mean, he doesn't have such a prominent role.
You're right. Yeah, he's got a big introduction in this.
He's a guy called Joseph Stern, portrayed by a guy called Hunt Block. And in the film, he's a Jewish guy who's like really like a good guy because unlike all of the other people in the Dirty Dozen, he's in prison because he fought an officer who was a racist. This guy who's like Jewish, he fought a racist officer, and he told him like you should be on the other side of the war or something like this. But he doesn't have such a prominent role. At least I forgot it immediately after I watched the film. I remember only this kind of premise. And there is also a black member of the Dirty Dozen called Joseph Hamilton, who's portrayed by Ernie Hudson, who I know mostly as Winston from the Ghostbusters.
Yes.
And for some reason they were really precise to mention that he is in prison because he killed his white lover because she was unfaithful.
Yes.
This is somehow important.
Well, okay, but
this becomes like a big deal to one of the guys later too. It's like he killed a white woman.
Yes, exactly. But this is the whole story is something like.
I mean, that is historically accurate in the sense that white people were obsessed with black men killing white women, even when it didn't.
Sure.
But in this film says that that's kind of a fact of a film.
Well, in this film though, he says that he walks in on his partner in France, and she's with like an RAF guy who says that Europe is no place for N-words or something like that, or in London. London's no place for.
Oh, okay.
And then she laughs at him, and then he kills them both. So they're also racist.
Oh,
if that helps.
No, they have it coming.
No, okay. I kind of,
it's both though. So for all the people that don't care about racism, she also cheated on him. So if you're like a misogynist, you also get something out of this,
Okay. Yeah, I forgot about that thing. Yeah, that's very important. And when they actually it's the same thing as in the previous film. They go to Yugoslavia. They connect to the partisans who will help them, I guess, murder these future fourth.
But there is also this again, problem of rats.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, right.
Somebody that fucks them over. This is a consistent thing throughout these movies, is that the Germans do have agents.
Yes.
Everywhere, and it costs some people their lives. But in this case, what's his face?
Which one?
The commanding officer. What's his name?
Telly Savalos is the Major Wright.
Yeah, Major Wright decides that to reroute them to be dropped at a different location.
Yeah.
So that they don't get caught by the Germans, and they end up getting dropped in Skopje.
Yeah.
In Macedonia. Just a quick note about production of this film. So this film and Force 10 was produced in conjunction with Jadran Film, based out of Zagreb, which was one of the second of the largest film companies in Yugoslavia. Avala Film was one that was based in Serbia. Jadran Film is the one that's based in Croatia, and they were huge production houses. And so they were co-producers on this film, and so most of the material that was shot in Yugoslavia was shot in and around Zagreb, and it's kind of funny how they portray Skopje, which looks very different from Croatia, and Skopje in this film is very clearly somewhere in Croatia.
Yes.
It has these kind of Mittel Europa fucking buildings.
Yeah.
But
I honestly completely forgot it was in Macedonia until you just said it.
They put a dude in a fez and put some carpets out on on clotheslines to make it seem like it was in Macedonia, which is just a funny little thing.
It's a funny movie because it's very clearly a B movie made for TV, but I guess it also has moments every once in a while where something kind of cool happens, or it's not so bad, or it's sufficiently clever in an informed way. And I wonder if that's the influence of Jadran Films in it. I don't know, because the rest of it's just American made for TV.
Well, yeah, I think there's something to that for sure. Because first of all, to even get Jadran Film or any of these Yugoslav film companies involved, the state had to approve these scripts.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So when they spend some time in Skopje, they're kind of trying to blend in and pretend they're Yugoslavs. And what is I didn't mention earlier. 3 of the 30 dozen people are actually Yugoslavs. Who are not explained at all, I think, who they are. And 2 of them don't have any lines. And one of them has. They also don't have any kind of Yugoslav-sounding names at all.
No, one of them's Demchuk or something.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And there is an interesting line that one of them says, who says something. When they're in Skopje, he's walking around with Major Wright, pretending Wright is pretending to be Yugoslav, and then like a group of Nazis in uniforms march around in the street, and Major Wright or Telly Savalas kind of looks down, he lowers his head, and the Yugoslav guy tells him no, look up and look at them as you hate them. This is the best way. Then you will look like a real Yugoslav
totally.
or something
totally.
like this.
Yeah,
which is kind of
It was kind of cool. I don't know.
I mean, yes, but that's also.
I mean, again, these scripts were definitely approved by the Yugoslav state.
But the coolest lines were, that's what kills me about it.
Right. Well, we've seen. I mean, this is produced post some of the biggest partisan film blockbusters, and I'm sure that some of these filmmakers also had that in mind, and the guys that maybe had some influence on the script were put that in. Maybe, who knows?
So there is also a character of a stoic partisan woman in this one. The difference being that Jelena Vaskovic, I think is the name of the character, is actually a partisan commander in this one.
Yes.
And the actress is Natalia Nogulic.
Yeah, who played the Fleet Admiral Nechayev in Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yes, I knew that you will mention
So
that.
she's somewhere between what like an anarchist nihilist and a partisan, I guess. In her
Yeah,
career.
right. Nechayev.
Yeah, but she ended up writing some interesting book later in her life, following a Serbian woman in Kosovo who's like.
Well, she's from like the Serbian American like diaspora from Chicago.
Yeah,
right?
she is. She's Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah, her parents probably watched Chetniks in the theater. I mean,
oh, sure.
Yeah, and they move around a bit. Yugoslavia, they kind of, I noticed that they go very quickly from Skopje to Serbia, specifically to Pirot, and then to Bulgaria.
Which the guy calls Piro.
Yes,
yeah.
Telly Wallace calls it like, but later some Yugoslavs actually pronounce it Pirot. Yeah. And it's interesting because when they're on the border with Bulgaria, which is near Pirot, I mean, it's interesting because the Bulgarian collaborationists asked them where you from, and they say from Kumanovo, which is a town in Macedonia, which they landed originally, and the Bulgarian says like. Or was it a German? I'm not sure, but he says like something like, "Oh, fucking Macedonians," you know. I hate them. And but I was wondering why would they cross the border there, and then I saw there is actually another Kumanovo there in Serbia at the border. So I don't know if they confused the two Kumanovos or whatever, but yeah, I mean the Kumanovo and the actual spot where they cross the border to Bulgaria is not in Macedonia, it's in Serbia. But I guess they were supposed to come from the Macedonians because, but I don't know. It's a kind of something strange happened there.
Yeah. Well, a lot of things happen in this movie that are pretty strange. I would say most prominent among them are explosions that don't seem to kill anybody ever. People that fall without being shot frequently. It's a lot of magic going on in this movie.
Yes.
Yeah, but this is typical of partisan films in general too. I mean,
this one takes it up a notch. I think.
What is different from Partisans films is that the same thing is that Partisans are heroic, but they don't kill and slaughter hundreds of Germans in these American films. They're even sometimes killed by Germans, but who kills Germans partisan style are Americans.
They're
totally,
the ones that are just mowing them down with machine guns or whatever. Yeah, a big Walter vibes in this. Walter defends Sarajevo with the train and all this, and they're not like doing the rooftop. Walter's way better. I mean, Walter's a great movie. This is not a great movie.
Yeah,
it's fine. It's a fun afternoon watch. Did you notice at the end though, with what's the partisan woman's name in it? She's
Yelena.
Yelena. This is Yelena. Yeah. At the end, he's like, come with us. The what's his name?
This is what I was going to suggest for the
Major
cold
Right.
open.
Yes. When he offers like the Yugoslav government in exile in London will take you and they'll give you a job and stuff like this. Like,
she's like, no, I go to fight for Tito's partisans.
Yes.
And then she's like, you come to Yugoslavia again. And he's like, damn right.
Yes. Yeah. It's just an interesting offer, and a weird mention, I think. Why don't you go stay with the king? You'll love it.
I guess he's supposed to sound like an idiot there, like, and she kind of, her reaction is like that. Because she says like, when you say it, it almost sounds possible or something like this. Maybe she didn't want to like bother him with information.
I think you're being very generous.
Actually, we're not on the same side and stuff like this. No.
Yeah. It's very nice of her. Hospitable. So we got our Dirty Dozen trope locked in. Let's do Force 10 of the Navarone. Force 10 from Navarone.
Fritz, when you mentioned that you're like, your dad has shown you this film, you're kind of dating yourself there because somebody's dad has to be old enough to have watched.
I'm just talking about podcast listeners.
Well, I mean,
their dads are old enough.
As well.
Yeah. It's clearly
a couple.
You're talking about boomer parents. So
yeah.
Like Gen X parents probably wouldn't have seen it. They might have seen
I think
Dirty
right.
Dozen.
Yeah, who knows what they watch with their kids? Like,
no, this is boomer. This is like boomer dad.
They watch
this is some boomer dad shit. Yeah.
They watch with their kids like films about the Seattle grunge scene or something.
Yeah, they just watched Nirvana Unplugged on repeat.
Yeah.
Now look, son, he did heroin and then killed himself.
But he was very talented.
That generation's all like fucking financiers and shit anyway. They're just they're mostly coke-addled and probably unable to talk to their kids at all. So
I was super disappointed with Krist Novoselic.
yeah, that's a bummer. That's a bummer in a lot of ways. Yeah.
What did he do?
He's just a right.
He became like a kind of like a Trump dude after being a Bernie.
Before that, he was kind of on the right, though, if I recall. I think
I think he was kind of always like on the libertarian type
Yeah.
thing. But I mean, like he had a good taste in Yugoslav punk music.
Oh yeah.
Because he was like rebelling too much in Seattle, and so his parents sent him to go live in fucking like Pula in like 1984 or something. It's like got exposed to a lot of bands.
I mean that scene is politically not great in general. I mean now Obama had like celebrated his birthday like he's like 5 years old with in his like compound worth millions. With originally it was supposed to be 500 people attending, and they cut it down in half. But a lot of celebrities, and one of them is Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam. So
nice.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever play this late 90s PC game called Commandos?
I don't know. Let me look it up real quick.
No.
It was fucking awesome.
Oh yeah, Commandos. Yeah.
Where it was literally Force 10 shit. Like you have like a small group of British commandos, and you have to do shit like blow up dams.
Great game.
And it was a lot of fun. It was actually, from what I remember, I mean, I think the game came out like 1997 or 8 or something. It was like quite difficult from what I remember.
Yeah, it was really hard.
97 was a good year for video games.
This was 98.
It was also like Age of Empires and shit like that came out then. Yeah, but Commandos really reminded me of this movie, because that like if I remember correctly, and I haven't played this since I was a child, the British Commandos did have some of this like the shit that you'd see in like the intertitles and like between like missions was very much this like, what chap. Whoa, we go bomb down and that kind of thing.
Very Force 10,
which is this fucking film.
So Force 10 from Navarone is a sequel to Guns of the Navarone, which is another great boomer dad film, where like a massive gun emplacement, I think in like a mountain or something, right, is like destroyed just in time.
Yeah, on a Greek island. Right?
But that one is from the 60s, and this is 78.
78, yeah. And also this was based on, is this the same author that wrote the Dirty Dozen books? Alistair MacLean.
No. The Dirty Dozen is E.M. Nathanson.
Okay. All right.
Irvin Nathanson.
Okay. Well, never mind.
So my opening notes for this film are strong 1970s opening, British narrator voice, ships going awooga.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, actually, the intro differs depending on the cut of the film.
Oh, really?
So the version that I saw has the British voice, which is like, deep in the Aegean, there's an island called Navarone. And they go through this thing. And then there's apparently an American one, too. And the British version is slightly longer.
Huh.
Which is, I guess, the one I saw. I looked it up later. And I guess I saw the British one because it has a British announcer voice. And it explains the whole Guns of Navarone film that happened before that. And then it's established that these elite commandos landed on this island, blah 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 blah. You see bunch of ships going to Wooga, and then somewhere in England, 1943.
Yeah, I mean the film has the same characters that were in the original film from the 60s. I think the three main characters are the same, but they are portrayed by different actors. So in the original film from I think 61. Were portrayed by Gregory Peck and David Niven and Richard Harris. So in this film, it's Robert Shaw, Edward Fox, and Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
It says it's a sequel, but there is some discontinuity between the films, I would say, because...
Some significant ones,
yes, yeah.
Like, for example, knowledge of German comes up later. But yeah, we'll get to that.
So, yeah, it has the same premise... a bit different here because a kind of, let's say, irregular group of soldiers is sent to Yugoslavia for a very dangerous mission behind enemy lines. I think also in 43. What is different here is that it's not a band of criminals, but it's in a highly irregular group, the kind of secret mission that's even secret for the American army, so they have to like hijack a plane to go to Yugoslavia.
So there's two groups, right? There's the US guys who have their mission.
Yeah.
And the British guys who have their mission. The British guys are
but they go together.
Right? Yeah, they go together, but like the British guys are immediately established as like these kind of witty English,
also
guys
older, not in their top shape seemingly.
Yeah. Like oh, how's the leg? Oh, it's still here, they've clearly like been through a lot. One of them is now in like the civilian sector, and he's been called up. Miller, who's like this demolitions expert, has been called up again into regular service. And so like the Americans and the British are kind of reluctant to work together, but okay, they have this mission, they're going to do it. And so Harrison Ford is leading the Americans. And
this is first Harrison Ford's role after Star Wars, and he said that he kind of accepted the role because he was scared of being typecast, so he accepted it. And you can see in his portrayal of this guy, because he really kind of portrays him as this very kind of humorless, kind of uptight, in my opinion, anti Han Solo, kind of very boring, kind of very stuck up guy.
But he's still Harrison Ford, so I mean, it's impossible not to see him.
But then, like again, if you've seen, obviously, if you've seen the fucking first Star Wars film, he's like, when they introduce his character, he's immediately like reluctant to take these British guys on board, kind of reminiscent of Han Solo. Yeah, in some ways.
Narratively, there are similarities, but the way he portrays him, I would say he's very different from Han Solo. And which is also kind of makes the film. I mean, it would be better if he was Han Solo. The film would be more fun, I would say.
Now that I think about it, another Star Wars comparison is the two British guys. They strike me very much as and even in their sizes, as a C-3PO and R2-D2. Because there's the one that's like more proper and in control of what's going on. And he's much taller, and then there's the little guy who has all the little tricks.
Well, there is another Star Wars connection because it's not only this group of like irregular commandos on this mission, because they're super secret. So as I said, they have to steal this plane to go to Yugoslavia, and in the process of stealing that.
But this is also like Han Solo, like, right? I mean, Han Solo was a smuggler.
But the difference being that here they're doing this under orders, and it's not. They're not like a band of.
He's not a rebel.
Yes, he's not a rebel.
Well, I mean, they're obviously not the same character, but I do see some similarities in.
I mean, for me, he's a kind of anti-Han Solo because he's the kind of guy that Han Solo would hate because he's like he's very kind of stuck up, very serious.
Look, just to tell you how serious he is, the British guys have to loosen him up.
Yeah, they're the fun ones in this film.
That's fucked up.
But the other similarity with Star Wars is when they're in the process of stealing this plane, military police, American military police comes who don't know about them because they're super secret, so they want to arrest them for stealing a plane. And there is a fight there. And at the time, this like group of military police, they have a prisoner, an American soldier who is like a black American soldier who is portrayed
Sergeant Weaver.
Yeah, we call Weaver, who's portrayed by Carl Weathers.
The great Carl Weathers.
Yes. Mostly known for his role as Apollo Creed in the Rocky films. But also
losing both his arms in Predator.
Yes, exactly.
Also Arrested Development.
Yes. But also, today, he's one of the characters in the Star Wars TV series The Mandalorian.
Okay. Yes. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is another Star Wars connection. You're right.
And then he thinks, I guess, these are some cool guys trying to steal a plane. So he decides to join them and kind of, because he joins the fight against the cops and he ends up in their plane against the wishes.
Well, but more importantly, like he kicks the cops' asses. Like they're getting their asses kicked by the cops. Like Harrison Ford's doing his part.
Yeah.
But then Sergeant Weaver comes in and like beats the shit out of a bunch of these cops so that they can, take this plane.
What's your name, kid? Warner. What's yours?
Well, it sure in the hell ain't Rastus. Walter.
And then he like hops in with them.
Yes. And then this is how he ends up in Yugoslavia.
And that gives them also the aura of criminality that the Dirty Dozen model has, even if they're not at all criminals, except for Carl.
But so the mission here, so every time it's a different mission. The mission in this film is they have to, so the British guys, their mission is they have to eliminate German agent who infiltrated the Partisans, the Yugoslav Partisans, and is operating under the name of Captain Leskovar. And what is the mission of the Americans?
Their mission is to blow up the bridge.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
To help the Partisans stop an advance
So
of
again,
German forces.
like I mentioned this before, but this is kind of the American answer to Neretva, which is, a film we covered in the Battle of Neretva was the film that we covered in our first film series. Franco Nero here being the actor, Franco Nero being the connection, he was in both films.
Yes, in Neretva he portrays an Italian officer who wants to join the Partisans, like sincerely.
Yes.
And here he portrays the German agent who infiltrates the Partisans.
Yes. Leskovar.
Yes. Which is a Slovenian last name.
Is it really? Okay,
Yes.
I was wondering about that name. It seemed kind of made up.
Yeah, it is a Slovenian last name.
Okay, makes sense. Slovenians, weird names.
This film is different from the two previous that we discussed, but has something in common with the first one, and that's that it features Chetniks. But they're portrayed.
Hold on. Before we get to the Chetniks, right? They get shot down over Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
Now, there's another Harrison Ford kind of Han Solo moment there, where he's like, "We got company." Like he.
Yes.
Like it sounds very much like Han Solo. I'm sorry. I know this might just be projecting. But then I really cracked up because the Germans in the planes were literally, their lines were just Achtung, Achtung. and that's it.
Yeah, Achtung gets you pretty far in this movie also if you're pretending to be a German.
Yeah.
Yeah, Achtung also gets you pretty far in the last one that we talked about.
Yes,
well.
true.
Like, that's pretty much the only thing that you hear Germans say.
This film was also like the Secret Invasion. It was filmed in Yugoslavia in the period of 5 months, I think. Roger Corman did his film in like a month, so it was a big longer production. And it also had a lot of help from the Yugoslav government and army. I think there were like 2,000 Yugoslav soldiers participating in this film, and like the Yugoslav army gave tanks and a lot of equipment, and supposedly even Tito visited the set during the filming.
There's that famous song by Zabrano Pušenje called "I Don't Want to Be a German," and it's about not wanting to be an extra in a German in an international production because all the foreigners get to be partisans and all the locals have to be Germans. I think this is
it's a
case in point of this. Yeah, because all the German soldiers in this are actually like Yugoslav.
And you can very clearly see that. Yeah,
they definitely don't look like German guys. No.
They look exactly like partisans, like all the Germans in this film.
So I just want to quickly about Sergeant Weaver. So, he jumps into the plane without anybody seeing, and then they're all the guys are pretty much racist against him, like immediately.
Yeah.
And so like one of them's like, "You're not going to like where we're going." And then the other guy says, "The Partisans are going to think they're invaded by Zulus."
Yes.
But I would like to mention that there's like a historical precedent for like this, black soldiers in Yugoslavia, because a lot of Tuskegee airmen were in fact shot down over Yugoslavia. Most of them were rescued by the Partisans, although there was one case of one being rescued by the Chetniks as well. James Alonzo Walker. There's Lieutenant William Green Jr. was a black American Tuskegee airman who was decorated by the Partisans because he was shot down over Yugoslavia after conducting, I think, escorting a bombing raid somewhere in Germany from Italy. Was shot down over Yugoslavia and then helped the Partisans organize a couple like airdrops from the British.
Oh, word.
And so he was later decorated with like a, some partisan, whatever award. So I guess it's probably not that many U.S. servicemen that were awarded both like Purple Hearts with George Washington on them and like a bunch of Red Star.
Yeah, great.
Partisan awards. So, I mean, this isn't like without some sort of historical precedent. Like, I think that in this particular case, there's a lot of like late 70s American racial politics.
Oh, yeah.
Coming through in this film.
Yeah.
But in the context of the Second World War, it's definitely not, out of place at all.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, the film is different from the two previous ones because it features Chetniks, but it's also interesting that they're portrayed in a very, very different way from the first film we reviewed, the Chetniks.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a very drastic difference.
Yeah. It's even more drastic than the Partisan films or the actual ones, I'd say.
Yeah.
So I'll be honest, when I was first watching this, and I was taking notes as I was watching it, the Chetniks are at first disguised as partisans, right?
Yeah. Awkwardly.
And so you get this guy, Colonel Dražak.
Yes.
Which they just added a K to Draža, I guess.
Best character in the film.
Yeah. And
who's not, I guess, is not supposed to be Draža because he's kind of portrayed as a local kind of Chetnik commander and not the...
Yeah, but I think he's also like the spirit of the Chetnik.
Yes.
In this one.
Yeah. Totally. And so like when you see him at first, I was like, oh my God, why are the Partisans why do they all look like Chetniks?
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. Why are they so racist? What's happening?
And like, well, no, because like even before you get to the racism, I was like, their hats are wrong.
Yeah.
And so I started like racking my brain. I was like, fuck, like, okay, so this was actually made in Yugoslavia. You'd think, okay, well, let's see what happens. And then this like Colonel Draža comes up as like the stereotype of like a Slavic fucking like monster.
Yeah, he's
like,
portrayed by Rachel Kiel.
Yes.
Who plays Jaws in
The Spy Who Loved
Moonraker.
Me.
Yeah.
A couple James Bond actors in this movie, actually. We'll get to
a very large person. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, with like
massive,
horrible grimace and just like looks just like insane.
Growling out Serbian phrases to them.
Yeah. And he's like, you're welcome to Partizan Call. We will now eat and drink and fight and like all this kind of shit.
And he's extremely fascinated in the worst way that he sees a black person.
Yeah. He's like, Blackie, come here. And then like tries to like cut him with his knife.
But Apollo Creed floors him, so it's all good.
Yeah. But then, of course, we find out that they're actually Chetniks.
We are Chetniks, not stinking partisans.
And the Chetniks take them back. But I like he says, we'll eat and drink and fight the Germans. And then he brings them to the camp, and the Germans come out, and it's very, very clear. He's just like, we work for the Germans. Yes. They are our friends.
Not you, not the English and the Americans. He's very overt about it.
Yeah. I mean, this is like even more overt than like in the Yugoslav film.
Much more. Way over the top. Yeah,
like in the Yugoslav films, like in Neretva, for example, like the Chetnik characters even have like some more nuance to them.
A little. They're still fools. But
in this one, they're literally just like bloodthirsty, like just fucking like
bumbling savages.
Yeah, who are like completely just servants of the Germans.
Yeah,
and like
gleefully,
like slobbering fucking bloodthirsty shit.
I love the little Chetnik kid. Like when they reveal that they're really Chetniks, they all turn their hats around, to like show that they're actually Chetniks, and the little kid like flips off the others.
And later, Dražak, he has almost the same line when he talks to the kid as Draža did in Chetniks.
That's right.
When he talks to his son, he's Draža in the 43 film says, he's a real Chetnik or something like this.
Right.
And Dražak also says to the little kid, like, you will be a real Chetnik. Like so I don't know.
So there is some continuity.
Yes. You know what? The irony about that is that little the child actor is a Bosniak kid named
Oh no.
Yeah, Ramis Pasic.
Oh.
So he plays like an aspiring Chetnik child who like snitches a bunch of times, like on the Partisans.
Yeah,
but he's a Yugoslav child actor of Bosniak origin.
But some of the main characters, they managed to escape the Chetniks, right?
yes.
And they are helped by a partisan woman who infiltrated the Chetniks.
Yeah.
So called Marica Petrovic, the character portrayed by Barbara Bach.
Yeah,
And,
also a James Bond.
Yeah.
Femme fatale and wife of Ringo Starr.
Yes.
I learned today.
And,
For real?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so we get to the woman partisan character, basically kind of...
You know her pretty well at this point.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's very helpful and heroic.
Yes. Very stoic.
Yes.
Dies.
This film also features a partisan commander called Marco.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's
So
Marco
some
and
of
what's her
them-
name?
Yeah. Yes. Her name changes.
Marco plays a pretty important role in this one, too.
Yeah. Yes. So they managed to escape the Chetniks, some of them at least, with the help of Marica.
Well, Marica, like,
Yeah.
kills, like, a bunch of German soldiers.
Yes.
Yeah,
in order
she's
to
characteristically badass and
Yes.
Yeah, because they're not really sure whether, they think she's, like, a Chetnik, and she's totally ready to kill them, and then she just kills the Germans and lets them escape. Lets them know that she's with the Partisans.
yeah.
And they joined the Partisans at some point, who have a commander called Petrovic, which is also the last name of Marica. I don't know if that means they're related somehow or something. And
I think they just think that everybody is named Petrovic. Like, we've seen that name even in the Chetnik.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Major Petrovic is portrayed by a British actor, Alan Badel, who really doesn't know, like similarly like the commander in The Secret Invasion, who is supposed to be British, but he's played by an American who doesn't really try enough to be British. This guy really doesn't try not to be British. And that actor actually was known for his voice, which was called The Sound of Tears.
Ah.
Yes.
How about that?
So a very kind of stuck up partisan major who's like suspiciously very British in his behavior, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But again, he portrays like this kind of archetype that they keep bringing up of the Partisans, which is like somebody who, like, he understands brute military force. He understands, like, that the Germans have this many guys, we have this many guys, we need to fight them. But like he doesn't have time for like the intricacies of like detailed sabotage operations. Like he has no time for that. And this is like a consistent theme throughout, which is like Americans and British are there to do like the detailed, they're there to help, but in like these specific ways that like the Partisans can't do because they're, whatever.
The Partisans
like
are there to
folk.
die heroically.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting that all three films kind of portray Partisans as a kind of very well organized army. They don't portray them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, especially in contrast to the Chetniks, which is so interesting about it, that like in a way, like racially, the Partisans are British, and like racially, the Chetniks are some kind of like savage.
They are a Balkan, like Orientalist
mountain
fantasy.
Race. Yeah, exactly.
They're the cannibals of the Balkans.
Yeah, as opposed to so the ideology gives you
these
these two different phenotypes, which is I think interesting as well.
Yeah. I mean, like we said, the Chetniks in this film are more savage than they are in like any of like the Yugoslav like partisan films. To the extent that like they're like scary, like you hear that, you find out that like some Partisans infiltrated the Chetniks because they're these Chetniks with bandages on their faces.
Yeah.
But they're just like straight up like wearing
they look like fucking Klansmen. Like
or like ETA.
The
the basket. Like there's these white masks with only like eye holes, and then they're wearing like these, I don't know, like fur vests and it's
scary with them with Drajak, the mountainous Chetnik ape man. It's awesome. Oh, man,
the Partisans the Partisans look like super put together compared to them. Like We'll see this at the end too, like when there's that sequence where they all emerge from the cave. So basically, the British guys, they have this mission to kill Leskovar, and there's some like weird continuity stuff. And
maybe we just need to mention so Leskovar is there with the Partisan commander, Major Petrovic, but when they confront both Leskovar and Petrovic with the information they have that Leskovar is a German agent, Petrovic laughs and says, no, there was a German agent infiltrating us, but we killed him months ago. This is like the real Leskovar, who is like our guy, not a German. So the Brits and the Americans have like no choice at the time, and they go along with this.
Right.
But what doesn't make sense to me is that the whole reason that the British guys were put there is because they would recognize Leskovar, right?
And they did. They did when he first saw him.
They did, but like they also then later, I guess, forgot that.
It kind of feels that way, or the British guys just
because
playing it
until
cool.
the very.
I mean, Harrison Ford doesn't really care. He just wants to blow up the bridge,
Yeah, but Harrison Ford doesn't know. And he has one particular mission. The British guys seem to just be like, oh, well, maybe they did kill him, and like maybe we're wrong, because like it doesn't like come up until the very end of the film, and they still don't recognize him as such, right? They figure it out, but it's not that they recognize his face, which is the whole point of them being sent there in the
because they had personal experiences,
which doesn't really make sense.
And
to me.
they're supposed to know him like personally, because they met the same character in the first film, which was filmed in the 60s. But I guess because everyone in the film now is portrayed by different actors, I guess somehow they're like, okay, maybe that's
because like at the very beginning when they get captured by like the Partisans, he's like, oh, they made me. They figured out, like, that we recognized him. And then later...
But they couldn't shoot him. I mean, if the Partisans didn't think he was, if the Partisans were saying, this is our guy, they can't, like, fucking execute him in front of the army, So there's also, like, maybe the British guy was just like, what the fuck can I do about it?
Yeah, I don't know. But
yeah. It was weird. It was weird. It is weird.
It's kind of an inconsistency in the film, I think.
So, all right. So we got the two missions. Blowing up the bridge is a problem. The engineer looks at it. He says the adorable R2-D2 guy looks at it and says that they can't blow it up. It's way too strong. It's built into the living rock. And then somebody suggests, why don't we flood the fucker by blowing up the dam? And that's the plan now.
Yeah, and then the water will destroy the bridge.
Yeah.
Which kind of doesn't.
You keep going.
It doesn't.
Come on, I want to believe. It's a mission. It's going to work.
Like I said, this is totally like the American version of Nereta. They know that they have to destroy a bridge, and they want to make a big spectacle out of it. Right. So they decide to destroy a dam.
Yeah, as opposed to a Nereta where the whole village comes to yell at the demolitions guy and threaten to kill him, and he does it anyway, and a child spits on him. In this case, they have this epic explosion, huge heroes, everything works according to plan. Yeah.
So of course, the Partisan commander is very hesitant to let these guys do what they're specialized in because he doesn't understand specialization.
He also doesn't trust the British anymore. He has like a lack of faith in British intelligence and American support and all this too.
Right, because they keep offering their support, but like, they keep getting bogged down by far superior German forces.
Right.
And, basically what's going to happen is that the Germans are planning to bring like their tanks and heavy artillery, and they're going to take it to the bridge, destroy their headquarters, which is in a cave, which is, I guess, reminiscent of what the Partisans actually did, right? I mean, Tito famously had his like cave headquarters in Derva, right? Where the Germans tried to kill him. So I think this is kind of a little homage to that.
Yeah, where Scorsese tried to kill him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, they have to get rid of this bridge, but he doesn't trust them. So, they're like, oh, just trust us. Give us 2 men. Fuck it.
Do something.
Do something.
But it'll be awesome.
Like he says, the People's Army does not conduct business in private.
Yes.
Although he says it with the British.
The People's Army does not conduct military business in secret.
Yes. Does not give a shit, this actor.
No.
He's just going to play it the way he's going to play it, and that's that.
I mean, come on. His voice is the sound of tears.
Yes. Yeah.
I did like the sequence where they break out the rest of their comrades out of jail, right? So like there's still a bunch of the original crew being held by the Chetniks.
Oh yeah.
And so Harrison Ford, what are the other guys' names?
It's Han Solo, C-3PO, and R2-D2. Well, this one's just Han and C-3PO. I mean, they're on their own now. Yeah.
Are we really going to do it that way?
That's how I keep track of them.
It's
I watched so many of these movies today.
It's Mallory and Miller, I think.
Yeah, Mallory and Miller. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Are the two British guys.
Yeah, Miller's R2-D2, right? He's the little explosives guy.
That's Miller, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And Barnesby is Harrison Ford.
Right.
Yeah, so they go to break out the rest of their crew from Chetnik jail. Well, actually, they're being held by Germans, right?
Yeah. In a Chetnik-controlled village, I guess.
Yeah. So they kill a whole bunch of Germans in kind of like proper partisan film style.
Yeah. Mass slaughter of Fritzes.
But then I like that they Weekend at Bernie's, that German officer.
Yes, that's such a good. Yes, this German officer they use for like a human shield, and he of course gets shot. And he
gets shot, and so they're busting out their boys from jail, and so they put the German officer in a car.
Yeah,
and then they make him pile They make him pile Hitler by like Harrison Ford like moves his arm while he's like in the
it's fantastic.
Car. It's a good little moment. And then there's a racial confrontation immediately after, so they get busted out of jail. And they're all fleeing the Germans and the Chetniks. And Sergeant Weaver decides to confront the rest of the unit about them being racist.
Because Harrison Ford just like yells at him and says, "Don't stand like an idiot there," or something like that. He's very like kind of dismissive of him.
Yeah, although Harrison Ford earlier in the film, like when he fights the MPs, the military police guys, one of the other guys says like something man, and he says, "He's not man to you, he's an officer, and you'll call him sir." Or whatever.
I mean, I think someone like asked him like, "Where did you learn to use like to fight like that?" And he says
a couple times. The first time, where did you learn
Carl
to punch
says
like
at
that?
Harvard and University, man.
At Harvard,
something like
yeah.
This, yeah.
And then the second time, somebody asked him, "Where'd you learn to use a knife like that?" And he says, "In Harlem."
Yeah.
Right.
But I found that interesting because it's kind of, I think it's specifically kind of ambiguous. The kind of this rebellion of Carl Weathers in the film.
Yeah.
Because so this is the end of the 70s. So obviously, I think, okay, I'm speaking like a non-American, but I would say for many people in the 70s, it was quite obvious that something was going on in terms of racism in America and that people are rebelling against it. But at the same time, so the film, I guess, wanted to comment on that, but not in a very obvious way. So you could see it as a kind of anti-racist kind of rebellion. But at the same time, you could also, if you're like not inclined to see it in that way, you can just say, well, yeah, okay, they're not treating him seriously because he's not one of the like special force commandos.
You can overlook it.
Yeah, he's just some guy who kind of attach himself to them, like for So this is why Harrison Ford doesn't like him.
Well, it's interesting that both of these films that we've just talked about have a black character in a time in which there weren't integrated units in the Second World War, and it's a kind of revisionist, deliberate revisionism, in that like in this particular case, Sergeant Weaver's being portrayed as like an honest guy who just wants to be part of the unit and part of the war effort, but is being denied by the racism like the troops around him. But like it has like an inherently kind of patriotic bend to it, right? Like he keeps popping up, right? They never want him there.
Yeah.
And he keeps popping up. Right?
Yeah.
Because he wants to help.
I wouldn't say that he's necessarily patriotic though. Like that isn't really obvious either. He's like,
well, I wouldn't say that he's patriotic.
You can definitely see it that way if you want to.
The message behind what his character is doing is kind of implicitly like this guy wants to help the war effort, and if only we let like, you know, guys who want
Why don't
to
people
help.
talk about the woke boomer war films? You know?
Yes. But I would say I would say that, like, you know, the film is kind of clever in a kind of devious kind of way, because I think the normal American racist people of the time, I think, wouldn't see that in the film because it's not overt. You know, it's not very kind of clear that the Weaver character is discriminated because of being black.
Also, in the same sense, it's not clear that the Partisans
explicit.
are communist either, you know?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. If you know, you know, but you don't have to if you don't want to.
I mean, I think a lot of people would...
No, but Weaver's obviously discriminated against for being black. I mean, from the very beginning.
Yes,
but not by Harrison
point.
Ford, though.
But
like
it's not explicit.
Yeah, but not by Harrison Ford.
Yeah, by lesser characters who are, like, wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
So
Harrison Ford is patronizing.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think people will sense that if they understand it, but otherwise you could just say, well, he's a commanding officer. Or whatever,
you know, Weaver never says to Harrison Ford, you're like a racist, or you're treating me like like this because I'm black or something like that. You can, you know, if you really want to, as I imagine a lot of like normal kind of common sense racist people would like to, especially at the time, just see it as, well, yeah, he's just like a criminal who kind of attached himself to this mission, and this is why Harrison Ford doesn't like him or tolerate him and is rude to him, I think. And I think this is deliberate on the part of the film, not to...
I don't know. No, I disagree. I think that his role is specifically to kind of emphasize this like patriotic moment of like there were black soldiers that wanted to help the war effort and that were denied, and he explicitly says in this like confrontation, which like I think this is it's an interesting scene, right? Because Sergeant Weaver stops their escape.
Yeah. The Germans are coming, the car's ready to go.
Like the Germans and Chetniks are coming, and he like stands in front with a gun and confronts them. And he uses the term mother hunching, which I think is fucking hilarious because they weren't allowed to say motherfucking for like whatever, probably ratings reasons. And so like, you know, he says something like, you know, you didn't give a mother hunch about us, about me, and like, you know, you were willing to let me die, blah blah blah. And then Harrison Ford says, Yes, I was. I wasn't come to save you.
But the implication is not that we didn't come to save you because you're black. The implication is we didn't come to save you because we are professionals on a mission. Because there is an earlier scene when him and the Robert Shaw character, the British guy, escape the Chetnik prison, and then Harrison Ford stops and says, well, what about our, like, you know, comrades who are still in prison? And Robert Shaw says, like, well, what about them? And then Harrison Ford's like, oh, yeah, right. You know, we have our mission. We have to keep going on. So you can also see it, you know, like that. Harrison Ford is just...
No, because Harrison Ford is like, oh, I treat you like any other, you know, subordinate. I treat you like any other subordinate officer. Yeah. Subordinate.
Yes. Although you can also see him as a racist, which he is, I would say. But
yes, it was like he was putting them in danger because he was so concerned with racism, which is also racist.
But that's another possibility, but it's not overt.
Yeah,
it did seem kind of overt to me because they were just like, "Come on, let's keep going. Like, we don't need to talk about this now."
But you'll see that if you already see things that way, and if you don't, if you see things sympathetically, you would see like a guy.
That way.
I think there is a way. Yeah, I think it's obvious to you because like you're like a not racist comeback or just a normal racist person. I think for like a normal kind of mainstream viewer in 1978, this would seem like, okay, so Carl Weathers has a problem that they don't treat him seriously because, you know, they're just on their mission and he's kind of, they don't care about him. Well,
you can look at it any way that you already look at the world. It will confirm your feelings about it.
I think they deliberately did it in an ambiguous way so it can be both things at the same time, depending on who's viewing it. Like, I think they wanted to satisfy all of their possible audience. So, the progressive people of the time would say, okay, yeah, this is like a black person, standing up to racism, and the normal racist would just see him as a kind of funny character who is a criminal, who has a problem that they're not taking him seriously, but that's because they are professional commandos on their mission, and he's just someone who attached himself to them. I think that's purposely kind of ambiguous.
Yeah, except that him bringing that up at that time is putting them in danger.
But that's also why, the professionals wouldn't counter that, and also when it is overt, when somebody is racist and Carl Weathers is beating the shit out of them, like it's out in the open, like they're talking about it, and it's the bad guys that do that, or like nobodies that die in a minute anyway.
I think the film deliberately kind of establishes the super over-the-top racist Chetniks also to make a difference between them and Harrison Ford and people like that. I don't know.
Yeah, because,
I don't know.
I mean, I'm not even sure how you guys might know, but I don't even know how much like Chetniks would give a shit, honestly, if somebody was black or not. Like, I don't know that.
Well, I mean, Chetniks did rescue some of these Tuskegee Airmen.
Yeah. I don't see that as being like a part of their ethos, but it's added in this movie to
as long as someone is not Muslim, I think whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know, like the in the end they manage in a super exciting scene to confirm the Leskor is a German agent. Previously, he's found out by the heroic partisan woman Marica Petrovic, and then Leskor kills her, so she dies tragically. She kind of serves this purpose that most of these partisan women serve in this film by dying tragically and heroically.
Yeah.
And then they discover that he is, and I guess they kill him, or I don't know what happens.
They do. They kill him on a train when they finish robbing the Mostar ammo dump for explosives to blow up the dam, and then too many inconsistencies. They all pile up, and then Harrison Ford shoots some Han Solo style from the waist in the gut. Yeah. So we have something that's like a woke racist force moving rapidly towards a dam. Yeah.
And in this super kind of, it's a quite long, exciting scene, they managed successfully to blow up a dam.
Sorry, there was a scene that I loved that came before all of this.
Yeah.
It's when they fucking decapitate that German officer.
Yes, with the wire between the trees. Ah, that was good.
Yeah, that was fucking, they clothesline this German fucking officer's head off.
Yeah.
In a beautiful, beautiful moment.
Yeah.
Which isn't actually even that important of a scene. It just made me.
No, it was super gore. It was really satisfying.
Yeah.
It was blood everywhere. It's great.
It's very well done. I would also like to note that the train that they're on, when you see the locomotive, it's definitely a Yugoslav Railways train.
Yeah.
like the markings are barely covered up. It's like definitely a train from the late 70s. That they still operate with the same markings in certain parts of that region.
So yeah, they blow up the dam, and it's a very long scene. Kind of cool and exciting.
No, it's cool. I liked it a lot.
And then gradually, because they damage actually, the Miller, the demolition expert, kind of thought of about that, but he didn't tell them that it will only damage
because he's a scamp.
Yeah, it will damage the dam, and then the water will do gradually all the work and destroy the dam, which is what happened. And we have a spectacular scene of dam being completely wrecked by water, and then this water destroying the bridge, which at that time had a bunch of Nazi army on it. And
I mean, the Germans are making that final offensive that the Partisans knew were coming. Yeah. So they finally bring all their heavy artillery, all their tanks.
Yeah.
Which the little hardware nerd in me noticed are not actually German World War II tanks, but in fact Yugoslav Army T-34s.
Nice.
With German markings on them.
That must have been confusing for the Partisans.
Yeah. Or for all those Yugoslav Army 18-year-olds in there doing their military service. And so the Germans are making their offensive. And it looks pretty grim for the Partisans. They're getting their, blown to shit by all this fucking artillery and tanks. And then the Germans start seeing the water cascading down from the mountains and they fucking realize that this bridge is going to
the jig is
collapse. Which, somehow I guess bombs couldn't destroy this bridge, but
it was built into the living stone, and stone is allergic to water. It just disintegrates instantly when hit by water.
And so the bridge comes down, and a bunch of Germans die, which we always like to see. And then there's
Nazis.
this really like socialist realist kind of sequence of the partisans emerging from their cave to like watch, the bridge go down and watch like the Germans die. And you see that commander Petrovic or whatever come out. His red star on his hat is very prominent compared to the other ones, because he actually has like one of the ones that's it's not like a patch, it's whatever, a medal or whatever. It's like gleaming, and then like all these other partisans coming. It cuts in kind of a photographic way that's reminiscent of like some of the photographs of partisans, in which like in one of the sequences like is very much centers a couple female fighters as well. It's like a very like socialist realist moment in this movie, and it lasts like a brief moment, and then it kind of goes back to our heroes.
The film ends with the 4 characters meeting. So it's the 2 British guys and Harrison Ford and Carl Weathers, who all 4 almost died, and then they meet after successfully accomplishing both of their missions, and they're kind of happy. And then the Robert Shaw character says, well, we're on the wrong side of the river, and we have no way of joining the Partisans, and this area will be swarming by Nazis very soon. And everyone's like, oh, fuck. And that's kind of the end of the film.
Oh, no, he says something, it's going to be a long walk home.
Yeah,
or something.
very, very English. Understated, etc. That's it.
We didn't mention that Sergeant Weaver kills Chetnik Dražek.
Oh yes, yeah.
In this kind of like epic fight scene, and like Dražek cuts him again with a knife, and he says, "You bleed red blood, Blackie," and whatever.
Weathers then throws a knife at him.
Yeah. There was some good like mowing down of Germans as well. We didn't mention this, but Marko kind of pulls a Bata Živinović with his like he kills like 30 Germans from behind with like one clip. He just like cuts them all down, and then that's the last you see of it. I don't know if that's a little homage to the Partisan film or just something that they did at the time anyway.
I just read here that the cinematographer said that they originally wanted it to be filmed in Pakistan, but someone realized that Pakistanis did not resemble Yugoslavians or Germans, and the expense to make them appear so would be prohibited.
Where did you see this?
On Wikipedia under financing.
What's the fucking source for that?
Let's see.
It seems a little bit ridiculous to me.
It's the cinematographer's memoirs.
Interesting. I forgot to mention the reaction of the Serbian American diaspora in the US to Force 10, which, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? So, I mean...
But they loved it?
There was a big Hollywood blockbuster, right, about the fucking partisans being good guys. Meanwhile, the US accepted, like, all these fucking Chetnik, like, voivodas, all these fucking Chetniks in, like, Chicago, whatever. And needless to say, they were not happy, and there were many, many triggered Serbs freaking out about the portrayal of Chetniks in Force 10. So there's this fucking guy, and he goes, it showed the quote unquote collaborationist Chetniks as being under German control, led by a General Dražek, note the K, portrayed by Richard Kiel from the James Bond movies, and that really boiled my blood, as this movie even portrayed Chetniks killing American airmen. How could this lie be allowed?
Yeah. I think someone was upset that that Dražek was also racist, for that same reason.
Well, I mean, ironically, he doesn't bring that up as something that he objects to. He doesn't. He doesn't object to that at all. He objects to the fact that this is a communist lie that what? They were German collaborators?
That's around.
It's a quote unquote collaboration as Chetniks. I mean, it's pretty well established. I mean, the U.S. government acknowledged that. Actually, the more you read into it, this kind of ties into the rest of our earlier arc. I was reading a bunch of these comments about Force 10 from like these old like American Serb diaspora Chetnik people, and they attribute the Allies switching to the Partisans as being Churchill's fault.
Yeah, I've heard that as well.
And it's all Churchill's fault.
That he lied about how well the Partisans were doing, and in fact they had almost nobody following them, and the Chetniks were the most popular.
I mean that goes with the kind of devious British people stereotype, and also with the they see him as a kind of grima worm-tongue character who seduced their king in London, and basically kind of forced him or seduced him to call Chetniks over Radio London to join Partisans, and that's how they explain it to themselves.
He is very seductive.
Yeah. So they obviously did not like this film at all. The main Serbian American newspaper came out against it. It's all communist lies.
It was a complete defeat for them.
Whereas Chetniks was, a very accurate portrayal of what happened in the Second World War.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were bothered because this film was, after it was made, I think one of the first screenings was at what's the name of the other, like not the White House, but the other thing where the
Camp David.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Jimmy Carter saw it at Camp David.
Really?
Yeah. So I guess that really bothered the Chetniks in America.
Yeah, because the American president is watching communist lies, communist infiltration into Hollywood. And hopefully in future arcs we'll get to talk a lot about these insane nationalist diaspora in the U.S.
Yeah,
because they were deeply, deeply paranoid about everything being a communist partisan plot.
Of course.
So Harrison Ford, communist, confirmed.
Okay, great.
All right.
He's in Dubrovnik now, I think, or he was anyway.
For real?
Yeah.
Did he crash his plane? He nearly caused. He's like
he's making contact with the locals. There is a heroic woman there.
He's an avid pilot. But he's like pretty bad at doing some of like the regular protocol shit. He almost caused like a major fucking collision at like LAX or like some major airport. Yeah.
Well, he's a rebel.
Yeah. He almost got his like pilot's license revoked or something, or maybe got it suspended for a little bit. All right, how do you guys want to close this out?
Well, I don't know. We watched 4 films. Obviously, there is a big difference between the first one and the second 3, which are very similar to each other in their kind of formula, which is basically this kind of Dirty Dozen formula. Also, as we mentioned, seen now in different contexts, but in the new, what it's called?
Suicide Squad.
Suicide Squad. The Suicide Squad, not Suicide Squad.
Yeah, whichever.
Yeah.
The good one.
And I mean, probably also Suicide Squad, but I didn't watch that one. And I mean, the Suicide Squad is also kind of, it also even has like, they also deployed into a different country. A made up one called Corto Maltese, like the comic book character.
Yeah.
And they team up with like a local guerrilla.
Yeah.
So basically some partisans there.
Yeah.
And there is a prominent woman partisan commander in it.
A stoic woman partisan who, despite facing great tragedy, is still chill and awesome. Yeah.
Except the Americans are even more kind of scumbag characters in that one.
Yes, that's because it was based on a fantastic comic book. They very faithful to it.
But the Chetniks are different. They're, as Boris told us, more. It's more akin to the Western genre in its formula.
Yeah.
So it's not. There are no American characters there. It's just about the locals, the heroic locals. This time it's Chetniks.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's Balkan history of the Second World War seen through kind of America genre film. But it also reflects some historical development, like who are the good guys? Is it Chetniks or Partisans? But
Yeah, I mean, you can see that there was this brief window in which, like, the Partisans were even talked about in general and not in like a negative light, and it, it kind of makes sense for this kind of cinema, right? If you're looking for like a kind of good guy, bad guy narrative, it works pretty well, right? You have the story of people successfully kicking out and defeating like a power way greater than them.
Yeah, the Third Reich.
I mean, it's kind of made for like Hollywood, right? Which is why partisan cinema in Yugoslavia was super successful, and why this kind of spin-off worked in some ways for these American films as well. Although, I mean, these were pretty corny. I mean, the Yugoslav ones were too, but they were geared towards a domestic audience.
Yeah.
I mean, they're corny, but they're ultimately actually pretty entertaining films.
Oh yeah, apart from
Chetniks was fucking pretty, like, it was a struggle to get through.
Yeah.
Although it's the shortest film of the...
It was, yeah.
Yeah, but it felt fucking long. It went on forever.
Yeah.
The rest of them I really enjoyed, to be honest. I don't know. I think maybe... I don't know if I like Force 10 more, or... I don't know.
Force 10 more than what? Than Dirty Dozen 4?
Dirty Dozen 4 was pretty action-packed.
I like how sympathetic you are to Fatal Mission there. I like that. I think you'll enjoy Secret Invasion if you get around to it. That might be my favorite one from this bunch, just because of what's his name? Not Mooney. The Irish Leprechaun. What's the actor's name?
Mickey Rooney.
Mickey Rooney.
Yes. He kind of made it for me. It's a goofy
I think that like Force 10 would greatly benefit if there was a kind of Han Solo character in it, but if it was a partisan. That would make it a great film. And that would make sense because the Partisans are the rebels, like Han Solo is. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's not enough comic relief in that film. No. And there should be.
Well, you got R2-D2 with all his little gizmos and stuff, and it's fun. But it's not funny.
Let's be honest, it's a little too British. I mean, it's all just like, well, old chap, I suppose, with the Partisans. And,
It's the punchlines they're not making, Boris.
Yeah. It needs to be a little bit more of like kind of badass.
Secret Invasion's a lot goofier. It really is.
Secret Invasion's way goofier.
Yeah. I mean, a Han Solo type character really could be a Balkan person.
Like Secret Invasion...
Yeah, absolutely. I would love it. Yeah.
So the TV show Partisan is full of kind of Han Solo type of partisan characters. So yeah,
I mean that's kind of the irony about the portrayal of. I mean, since we're ultimately talking about how like the World War II was portrayed, World War II in Yugoslavia was portrayed in Western films. I mean, they are portrayed as these kind of stoic, like like heroic, simple people. But in like the Yugoslav partisan films, there's a great amount of humor. It's all about like kind of
true,
like this dark humor. Really grim stuff is happening, but like there's a lot of funny heroics and unexpected situations.
Yeah, I mean the Yugoslavs are not stoic.
No,
that's
not at all.
When they're heroic, it's usually not typically in the stoic form.
Except when Tito's around, and then everybody's super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. That's in the films.
Yeah, in the films.
Yeah.
I mean, I think partisan films are even wrong in how they portray often Yugoslavs, especially if they're historical figures like Tito. I think it's all very too serious. And
yeah, that dude really liked to have fun.
Yeah.
And
it's like a party animal.
Yeah.
I mean, he had different lovers throughout the Second World War.
Yeah.
Tito, I mean. He was always a hedonist.
Yeah.
I really wish somebody would make that film. Like, I'd like to see a really good Tito film. I think it'd be entertaining.
It's controversial, Fritz. You make it.
Yeah, you want me to make it? All right. We have a week off now, so I'll get to work.
Yeah,
do it.
Did you announce that in the last episode?
I did.
Okay, maybe we can mention it again now.
I think I just did.
So for our patrons.
Well, faithful patrons, we are going to give you 1 week off from our premiums.
Oh, we're giving them a week off, you're saying?
Yes.
So we're giving ourselves a week off
from you, listeners.
So that we can better prepare this next arc. And since we established in the last episode that having any vacation is socialism.
Yes.
We are establishing socialism now.
Yes.
For 1 week, and then it's over. Then back to Fordism, literally.
Yes.
Little teaser.
Yes. Oh yeah, Ford is the first one, huh? Yeah, all right.
So see you guys in the fucking factory.
Okay. All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Ciao.